I am Annette Pasternak, the Stop Skin Picking Coach, and I'm here today with Stephany from San Diego. Hi,
Hi.
Stephany. So Stephany is a former client of mine and actually is part of an ongoing program that I have, sort of what I call my graduate group. So I do get to see her every once in a while still. So Stephany, welcome and thank you. And would you please just start by telling our viewers just like your general experience with picking, if you want to give a background on how it developed or, just take it up to the point where you decided to look for help.
Okay, sure. I think I started picking probably around when I was 12 or 13, right around puberty and all that kind of stuff. Um, I remember just being in front of the mirror a lot and like sitting on the counter and all that kind of thing. And I think it wasn't something that I really thought about a lot until I was a little bit older than that. Probably it started getting to the point where I thought it was problematic probably when I was like 19 or 20 or so. And I think like most of us, I tried my best to just stop and all of those kind of things. And that wasn't really working. So, Google searches, Google searches, Google searches. And at that time, I wasn't finding a lot. So I think I just kind of put it out of my mind for a little while and just, picked and picked. And then I didn't really get back into the point where I thought I needed to get help again until I was like 21 or so. I had just moved to California, and I decided just to try therapy and see how that would work. And I found that that was not helpful for me. It wasn't cognitive behavioral or anything. It was just regular old therapy. And I did that for a little while, and that wasn't really helpful. And then, back into, well, what do I do? What do I do? Probably went like another year like that, and then got into cognitive behavioral therapy, and that was a little bit more helpful, but in the end, I was doing that in conjunction with psychotherapy, and I was being medicated for ADHD and obsessive compulsive disorder, and I found that none of that was doing what I really wanted it to do, and I wasn't really getting a lot of results. So I just kind of, weaned myself off, well, with the help of the doctor, obviously, weaned myself off of the medications and stopped going to therapy. And then I was just like, I have to find something that actually works for me. And that is when I found Annette's website. And I was super skeptical at first, obviously. I think we all kind of are, because I had tried so many things. And, I thought, well, this seems really reasonable, though. And so I remember having my initial meeting with Annette, and then starting a little bit later, because the group therapy was something that I could actually afford at the time. So I was able to start when Annette started offering groups, and that was about 2 years ago, I think. And so just had a lot of success with that from like the beginning. And I think it was just coaching for me made so much more sense than anything else I had tried. So I really enjoyed it.
Great. So what specifically about coaching? I'm curious. What do you think? Because you did, basically cognitive behavioral therapy for this
Yeah.
is what's considered, I don't, state of the art pops into my head, but what I mean is like, is considered the approved treatment or something by, for psychology.
I think for me, coaching was more of like a whole life approach. It was really holistic, and that for me was the big difference. I think there were basically two big differences for me. The first was what I just said, and the second was that even though my therapist was trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, she had mostly worked with eating disorders and things like that, and she had really no experience. And I always felt like it was a lot of me explaining to her what dermatillomania was. And not that I had the words for it at the time, but that to me was very frustrating. And at the same time, I always felt like I needed more than just a pill or more than just this way of reshaping my thoughts. Like, obviously, there is a lot of what Annette does that is related to CBT and all of that, but it's so much more than that. Like, I think I've always needed more, like, even thinking about food choices and sugar and how that affects, and exercise choices, and just looking at your entire life and seeing what it really is that you personally need to change. It's something with coaching, it was, even though it was in a group, it was something that was so much more individualized for me than even therapy one-on-one was. So.
Wow. And you were in a full group too, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like 8 people.
Yeah.
8 women.
But that was nice too. It was nice to be able to see other people who were going through the same thing I was and touch base with them, all the time and feel like, because I feel like there's always such an aloneness kind of that I think that's changing maybe a little bit, but especially when I used to worry about it when I was younger, there wasn't much around, there wasn't a lot of people talking about it, and so it always felt like, why am I the only one going through this? And I feel like that was even just amplified in therapy because even my therapist didn't know what it was.
Right.
So it was something so much more different. There was so much more support in the group, I felt like.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I remember there were some really specific things that you tried with your diet during the group that made a huge difference for you. Do you want to explain what those were or the process that you went through?
I discovered through the program that food was a big deal for me and was definitely super related to my picking. The first thing we did was sugar, and that I found was huge. And I did sugar elimination for a pretty long time because I felt that it was it made such a big difference. But after I did sugar elimination, what I realized is that I was still having, from the charting, I was able to tell when I was having like flare-ups of picking and whatnot. And I noticed that it was almost always in time with my cycles. And so one of the things that Annette suggested to sort of regulate that kind of thing was to eliminate dairy. Because of all the hormones that occur naturally. So even if you don't have, hormone-added dairy products, it's still a thing. And so I eliminated dairy for like a couple of months, and the results were really good. I stopped having those really big spikes. Just generally, my cycle was regulated, and it had always been kind of weird ever since I got off hormonal birth control in the first place, which was something that I also did before I even started group, because that was a big deal for me. Was hormonal birth control was not for me. I had a lot of really bad side effects, a lot of which were emotional and contributing to my picking. But I found that eliminating dairy was another way to get those artificial hormones out of my body, and was just super, super helpful for me personally.
Great. All right. Is there anything else you remember from the program that made a big impact for you?
I think early on, and maybe what I didn't get with a lot of therapy, was just the really practical things. Like, here's the gloves that I bought to put on when I have a problem, or like, here's the stuff you can put on your mirror to cover it, and you can cover your mirror, like that's a thing. I think there was so much knowledge, whether in the group or from Annette personally, that was like just really practical and that seemed obvious after the fact, but that I think you maybe wouldn't have thought of at the time.
Okay, so at the end of the group, so the group was 5 months. So tell us where you were as far as like, if you remember how much picking you were doing in the beginning and then how much or how little at the end.
Gosh, it's almost hard to put myself back there, but I know in the beginning, I was definitely, first of all, I was one of the pickers who, I was one of the people who absentmindedly sort of picked throughout the entire day. And then on top of that, when I got home, I would normally, have like a session in the bathroom or something in front of the mirror, wherever, or in the morning or whenever. So there was a lot of, I remember when I was first monitoring my picking, it was really hard for me to tell how much I actually picked because it was so constant. And then it was also these times when I could really pinpoint how long. So I think the biggest thing for me that I noticed at the end of the first group that I did was that I could pinpoint exactly how long I had been picking. Like that was really huge for me, is that it wasn't happening constantly anymore. Like I was mindful enough that I could recognize when it was happening, and maybe I would write it down at that point. I think I was still blogging at that point, and maybe I wouldn't. And then if there was some time in front of the mirror, which there usually wasn't at that point after when I had just finished, except, once in a while, then I could keep track of that really well too, because it wasn't like one of those hours long sessions where you kind of lose track of time. It was more just like oh god. So there was so much more. I was aware of it in such a way that the thing that I noticed was that yes, it was diminished, but I could actually tell at that point. So that was big for me.
Yeah, great. And I remember your metric looked, amazing. Like it would, and for a while, like you were saying with the dairy thing, it'd be like no picking, no picking, and then
Yeah.
there was picking, and then no picking for 2 weeks, right? And then picking, and then those peaks went down, and there was so I thought, I mean, from my memory, you're doing very little by the end, and so of course the next question is like, were there times that it creeped back in over the following? What was it, year and a half? And I know you had some difficult personal times in that, but overall now, like I don't know, it just I want people to get a sense of that. This does take time, but like even at the end of now 2 years later, like you're such in a in a much better place, like much less picking probably and it's easier now, right?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing for me, obviously, I do have a lot less picking, but for me, it's been more of like I feel I don't have that cycle of shame every time I touch my face now. Mm-hmm. Like if I do pick a little bit now, I just go, oh, I picked. Oops. Like
yeah. So you've been, I guess, out of that main group for a year and a half probably now. And yeah, anything you want to share about that journey? Because I remember that at some point, and correct me if I'm wrong, were you in the graduate group since then, or you took time off? Okay.
Yeah, I've been in it since then, but it's hard sometimes to make it.
Right. Sometimes you don't make it for a few months, or that's totally normal. But yeah, just yeah, tell us like if there was like a time when you were like, gosh, I feel discouraged again, and how'd you get back on track?
I think there were definitely a number of those times. Okay. I think they are, after a year and a half, they're happening super less frequently. And I don't feel like that amount of despair and despondency that I felt like I felt a lot before a group and then even a few times after a group. But yeah, it was very different to go from meeting with my group, not all the time, but as much as we did, to, being able to pop into a graduate group every once in a while and it not being so structured. So I think there was a level of, oh, what do I do now? And so I'm sure there was probably a little bit of me struggling with that. But I think every time I had a really bad go of it, I was able to make it to one of the grad groups. And then it was like, it's amazing how even though sometimes exactly what someone's going to say, you really just need to hear it. Mm. And so I felt like a lot of the time I would be like, I'm not going to go because I already know like exactly what Annette's going to say. And like I can figure it out myself. And then I would go and either there would be something totally different that I had never thought of before, or maybe it would be something that I thought you might say, but it was very much like I still needed to hear it from somebody else. And I always felt like those experiences were really helpful and have gotten me to a point now where I feel really stable and haven't, like I said, felt any of that super, despair in a really long time. So
Great. And in the group, like you're so much also kind of a mentor to other women. There have been times when I can tell you've really helped other people. Has that been kind of part of, has that helped you just like getting to the group or just knowing that like, hey, all this experience wasn't for nothing, like I've obviously.
Yeah, no, I think for sure. I was thinking about that after last group. I think I was able to really provide some good resources for a lot of the people that maybe they weren't aware of, and that, we all run across different things in our journeys, and I feel like the really nice thing about the grad group is that there's a lot of people who have a lot of experience and then a lot of people who are starting out. So it's really a good mix. And it is nice obviously, to be able to help someone on the same path that I was on and am still on, obviously. But just to see that there is a way to continue that and to keep on, helping everyone else too.
Mm-hmm.
That cycle of shame and despair that I used to have every time I would pick is no longer there. Like, I can actually say that I don't have that anymore. Mm-hmm. And that is the biggest thing for me, is that, like, I remember when I was having all those really low times and then spikes and stuff like that, when I was actually in group, I was still so fixated on not picking at all and, like, being in recovery and all those things that it was, like, every time I would do it, I still had that sense of shame. And so I think with time, what's happened for me is that has gone away. Like, the fixation on it and the obsession with it, even though it was in a positive way and I needed it at the time, mm-hmm. that's what I feel like has really changed for me, is that no longer feels like a problem for me anymore. Yeah. It's just, maybe there's still some picking, but it's at a degree that everyone does a little bit of that. So right. I don't feel like guilty and horrible anymore when it happens. I just kind of, get on with it.
Yeah, that's real healing.
Yeah.
I mean, same with me. It's like, yeah, there's times when I'm like, oh, oops, okay.
Yeah.
Because it's not very much or very often, and so it doesn't affect our lives. And that's the real thing. That's the real freedom.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I didn't even know that until it happened. And then I was like, oh, this is what it is. I always thought it was like, you will never pick again, never touch your face again.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. And then it's like, oh, and I know you don't make it sound like that. Never, like, been a thing, but in my mind, that's always what it was. And then when I finally got to the point where I realized, oh, it's actually just, like, I don't have to feel bad about it anymore, then I was, and then because of that, I don't really do it anymore, because it was always a cycle.
Yeah.
So,
awesome. Well, you've done wonderfully. I mean, I'm very proud to have had you as I don't want to say student or coachee, whatever it is. And and thank you so much for coming on and telling everyone, all the viewers, about your journey. It's really, I know it's valuable to people to hear these kind of success stories, because there's so much despair and so much shame. And for somebody to come on and, hear just openly, you telling your story is really wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be sharing it too, for sure.
Contact me through my website if you're interested in coaching, and I have free resources there as well. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks.